Hi there and welcome to Time Tunnel, where we take a look at what was making news in the past. I'm Rob Similcare in New York. Today we travel back to this day in 1988 when a massive earthquake rocked the Soviet Republic of Armenia. Here's Peter Jennings with the news of the day.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The disaster that summoned the Soviet leader so urgently home began at 11:41 in the morning yesterday. Folks were at work, the kids were in school. The earthquake was measured at 7 on the Richter scale, and that is an earthquake capable of doing massive damage, and that seems to be the case. The Soviet Republic of Armenia, which is roughly the size of Maryland, is about 1,500 miles south of Moscow, right on the border with both Turkey and Iran. Based on what the International Red Cross knows, they believe that 30,000 people may have lost their lives, maybe more, that maybe 300,000 are homeless, maybe more. Our first report from the Soviet Union is the actual report that Soviet television viewers saw on their evening news. The English voice is our interpreter.
These are the ruins of Leninakan. In the central square of the town, the clock shows the exact time disaster struck. The second largest city in Armenia is in ruins. We saw houses turned into heaps of metal and concrete. Schools and kindergartens turned into heaps of rubble. We saw people, their faces full of grief and anguish. A tragedy you cannot express in words. According to preliminary estimates, the earthquake of unprecedented strength destroyed 2/3 of the city of Leninakan. The city of Spetak, 70 kilometers away with a population of more than 20,000, has been practically wiped from the face of the earth. Overall, in the disaster-stricken area, hundreds of thousands of people were made homeless, and tens of thousands lost their lives. Today, the Central Committee of the Armenian Communist Party, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, and the Council of Ministers of the Republic approved a message to the people of Armenia. Its words were imbued with a deep feeling of grief and sorrow for the bereaved families. It expressed faith in the spirit, courage, and endurance of the Armenian people. It declared the 9th and 10th of December to be days of national mourning. The whole country is coming to the aid of the victims, all the Soviet republics, and let us hope that the cities which rise from the ruins will serve as a memorial to the victims of this natural disaster. Today, Nikolai Ryzhkov, the chairman of the commission set up by the Politburo of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and chairman of the Council of Ministers, arrived in Yerevan, accompanied by members of the commission, including Minister of Defense Yazov. After a meeting at the Central Committee of the Armenian Communist Party, members of the Commission went to the scene of the disaster and started work. Tonight, we will be taking a decision to mobilize all equipment that can possibly be of use, not only from the army, but also from factories, and not only from Armenia, but from other republics, and from all sectors of the economy. We need mobile cranes with lifting power of up to 40 tons. We need gas specialists with their equipment, and everything has to be organized in shifts because the work is going on around the clock. I would like to make an appeal to all factory managers, work units, party organizations. Don't wait for a formal decision to be taken. Today, right away, start loading the equipment I mentioned, plus earth-moving machines, and send them here to Armenia.
As the Soviets saw it and heard it on television this evening. And incidentally, for them and for us, simply light years sooner than we would have seen such reporting before Mr. Gorbachev. For the Soviet bureaucracy, the challenge now is rescue and relief. The region hit is mountainous, making it just that much tougher. Here's our man in Moscow, Jerry King.
At a Communist Youth League office in Moscow, people brought in shopping bags with whatever they could donate, canned goods and clothing. The International Red Cross and the Muslim Red Crescent organized blood donations across the country, this one at the Moscow University, this one in the Republic of Georgia. Tonight's television news broadcast appeals for more blood, even though an official admitted they could not cope with the number of donors they had. Special accounts have been set up in banks for donations of money. For the first time, that included an account for hard currency from foreigners here. Workers in Minsk announced they would send a whole trainload of construction workers and equipment. Officials say the prime task is the search for survivors who may still be beneath the rubble. That and to find and bury the dead. Another headache, to find a way around the logistical problems. The Soviet military, which has been trying to stem ethnic violence between Armenia and neighboring Azerbaijan, is sending in additional units to care for the homeless to help rebuild, said the Azerbaijani Minister of Health. Pain and suffering bring our people together. Jerry King, ABC News, Moscow.
Try to put the Armenian earthquake in perspective. In the worst earthquake in recent years, it struck the Chinese city of Tangshan in 1976, and it measured 7.8 on the Richter scale. Almost 250,000 people died. The Mexico City earthquake in 1985 was an 8.1. 10,000 people died. The disaster in Mexico City, you may remember, was extensively and widely televised, which means it was something of a classroom for rescue workers all over the world. In Soviet Armenia, there are clear parallels. Here's Bill Blakemore.
The Soviets are facing a terrible problem no nation has yet been able to solve: how to take apart collapsed buildings quickly enough and delicately enough to save unseen thousands buried alive. Survivors in profound shock usually can't believe anyone could be alive in the heavy rubble. But lessons we've learned from earthquakes earlier this decade have taught how people can survive 2 or 3 weeks buried without food or water. Babies surprised the world in Mexico City when they were taken out alive from ruined maternity wards in the 2nd week after their 1985 earthquake. The Mexican buildings were of the same reinforced concrete construction, collapsing down in sandwiching layers, which we've seen now in the first pictures coming from Soviet Armenia. But the craft of getting quickly into such ruined buildings is in its infancy. Mexico City saw squabbling among different experts from France, Mexico, the U.S., and 45 other nations. Doug Jewett of Miami's Dade County Rescue was one of the experts in Mexico.
We have all the resources in the world, but we got one major problem. We cannot coordinate all these resources. There's always 15 chiefs and 1 Indian.
After the Mexico quake, international rescue teams met in Venezuela to try to get organized for the next big one, but they failed to agree on standardized rescue techniques. Earthquake rescue experts in many countries today, like these ready to go in France and in Britain, wanted to get to Soviet Armenia yesterday, but have had to wait for governments to work out details. There's a series of faults stretching from the Alps to the Himalayas. The Soviet earthquake was in the center of these in the Caucasus Mountains. And being in mountains, say geologists, can make earthquakes worse.
But you get much more effect because of landslides, because of loose soil, because of the ground conditions in the area.
Great plates of the earth are pushing against each other there, literally pushing the mountain ranges farther up, and will go on doing so for thousands of years to come. But without an international organized rescue system, the Soviets today are facing much of the same learning from scratch about catastrophic earthquake rescue so many have faced before. Bill Blakemore, ABC News, New York.